9 o'clock, 8 my time. I want to welcome everyone to the third meeting of the Interim Joint Committee on Economic Development and Workforce Investment. I appreciate everybody being here this morning. I want to remind everyone, just a little bit of housekeeping, make sure you have your cell phones on silent. And for those who are presenting today, when you come to the table, make sure that you push your little green buttons so that we can all hear you. Does any member have guests that they would like to recognize? Okay. Seeing none, Sasha, please call the roll.
Senator Boswell, Senator Funky Fromeyer, Senator Gardler, Senator Harper Angel, Senator Howell, Senator Mills, Senator Storm, Senator Thomas, Senator Wheeler, Senator Wilson, Representative Baker, Representative Bauman,
Present.
Representative Bratcher, Representative Callaway,
Here.
Representative Camuel,
Here.
Representative Duval,
Here.
Representative Elliott, Representative Gentry,
Here.
Representative Griffey, Representative Huff,
Here.
Representative Jackson,
Present.
Representative King,
Present.
Representative Colcarney,
Present.
Representative Lawrence, Representative Lockett,
Here.
Representative Pratt,
Here.
Representative Sharp,
Present.
Representative Tackett Lafferty, Representative Truitt, Co-Chair Wise, Co-Chair Branscombe.
Here. And we do have a quorum. First item on our agenda is the approval of minutes. We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Minutes are passed. Next item on the agenda is the State Workforce and Talent Team update. And I would like to invite those individuals to come on up to the table. Yeah, I may have to pull some more chairs up. First of all, welcome. Appreciate all of you for being here this morning. We're glad to have you. If you could, before we get going, please pull the mics up and state your name for the record. Ladies first.
Ashley Watts, President and CEO of the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce.
Ryan Quarles, President of KCTCS.
Jeff Knoll with the Cabinet for Economic Development.
Good morning. Jamie Link, Secretary of the Kentucky Education and Labor Cabinet.
Aaron Thompson, President of the Kentucky Council on Post-Secondary Education.
Once again, welcome, and the floor is yours. We'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be here before the committee and tell you what's going on with the statewide workforce and talent team. This is an effort that has been months ongoing, and our team will tag team some of our presentation this morning. I will bookend it. But we wanted to start by talking about the common goal that we all have, I believe, in helping our employers find the workforce resources they need, and also helping Kentuckians find good employment. And I think that's something that we could all agree upon. Workforce participation rate has been a significant concern of not only the General Assembly, but of the governor and all of us for quite some time. And the question is, how do we increase Kentucky's workforce participation rate? So that's what this effort was formed to help address. Several months ago, Governor Beshear asked Secretary Knoll and I to strengthen the collaboration between the Economic Development and Workforce Development cabinets, because they essentially go hand in glove. They both need one another to be successful. So Secretary Knoll and I contacted President Watts and had a sit-down meeting to talk about how we could collaborate more closely to address employers' needs and also to help Kentuckians find good employment. There are several workforce partners. There are local partners, there are regional partners, there are state partners, and everyone has workforce initiatives, but all of us have somewhat limited resources. And though we go 100 miles an hour every day trying to address workforce needs, we're limited in the coverage we have across the state. And we felt like bringing all of these bodies together, sharing communication, sharing resources, would give us the greatest opportunity to maximize those resources and have the greatest impact on workforce development, and again, meeting those employers' needs the best we can. And it all starts with the employer. They're the job creators. So we need to better understand what their needs are, and then we need to make it easier for them to find the resources they need. And a lot of times those resources are the workforce agencies across the state to help find employees, to touch on people who may have skills deficits. How do we get them the training they need to meet that employer's workforce needs? So working together, our goal is to address that employer need while also helping Kentuckians find those jobs. There are several members of this team presently. I've mentioned the Cabinet for Economic Development, the Education and Labor Cabinet, Kentucky Chamber of Commerce and the Chamber Foundation, the Council on Post-Secondary Education and KCTCS, the Kentucky Department of Education and their Career and Technical Education, the Kentucky Center for Statistics, so that we have the data that we can work from, as well as we've included two employer associations, the Kentucky Association of Manufacturers and the Kentucky Hospital Association, because we need that employer perspective of how we're going to address this workforce need. So with that, I'll pass it over to Secretary Knoll for his comments.
Secretary Link, thank you very much. Why don't we go to the next slide, if we could. Definitely skip that slide,
Yeah.
at least one picture of it. You know, I think Secretary Link did a great job teeing up who we are, what we're doing, and why we are all here. And I'm not going to try to read a bunch of words, but I am going to say that I think Kentucky is at a very important crossroads, but it's also one of those kind of crossroads where we're facing where to go based on opportunities both that we have experienced and that lay in front of us. I mean, the facts are that we have created a lot of jobs in Kentucky. We're going to continue to create jobs, but jobs are changing, the world is changing, and all I can say is that now we have to figure out where do we go down this path. And I'm old enough to have remembered being in a shop class with Mr. Quarles' father here, learning to weld and do things that I think actually served me very well in the roles that I have played. But the world was different then. And I remember 30 years ago when I worked in economic development then, that the whole issue of workforce and connecting to a company was very, very transactional and in some cases episodic. You'd have a job fair. People would show up, you'd screen them, figure out which ones you want to try to work with, and mainly you did a lot of on-the-job training. Well, guess what? Today it's not that way. And I think that we have to realize that those episodical events or those transactions, we can continue to find ways of working together, but to truly make an impact across the state of Kentucky with some 150,000 employers, individual employers, we have to realize that it's all about systems and it's all about processes. And when you have multiple organizations, which for me, having met those leaders and seeing their passion and feeling the commitment they have to helping people succeed, but yet realizing many of these organizations report to a local board. You have an independent board that relates to our community and technical college system. We have state organizations. We have private organizations. We have individuals that have passed through federal funding in which their job descriptions require them to report in a particular way that may not be the way of the world today. And so you've got all these great organizations that have great passion to really help our neighbors in Kentucky, and yet we all operate out of a process or an organization. And so in order to really effectuate change and to scale it, those systemic approaches have to be implemented. And you can't do that unless you've got great working relationships and understanding with the leaders of all those multitudes of entities that play a role in helping us move forward. So Secretary Link, if we could go to the next slide. We came together, as Secretary Link mentioned, and it's really important to understand there is no hierarchical requirement that this group come together the way that we have. It's come together because we all have that shared passion, and we have agreed that we have shared objectives in terms of really understanding to get this done right. It has to be a business-concentric approach. To really create change, you have to coordinate in a way that's more than just lip service, or it's more than getting a phone call from an employer saying they need a particular workforce, and somehow we all come together, make calls, and we show up, but there's no real systemic process approach to learn how to replicate that and make sure it occurs again and again and again. And ultimately, we all have strategies, but strategies by themselves are silos that make you feel good and get the job done at hand. But strategies that ultimately are integrated amongst our various organizations are where you create those changes and create those results. And at the end of the day, workforce is still about people. And when it's about people, it's still about relationships. And so we have to have those relationships to really get to where we need to be. Let's go to the next slide. And let's very quickly go to the next slide. I want to break it down one way, and that is that in our cabinet, our whole belief is let's create a job, let's make sure we connect the individual to that job, and let's change lives by creating an opportunity of stability and great employment for the individual. The eloquence of that is basically the mission that we all share, just worded differently. And I would simply say that, again, if we're going to achieve change as a state, we have great jobs being created with great wages. The world of industry and companies are changing. How do we help make sure that today's generations and future generations have those opportunities that they deserve? And this is not about a group coming together almost 18 months ago and saying we have a problem. This is about a group that has come together and say, together we can be stronger, we can be more impactful, and we have opportunities, and we all share that same objective together. Let's go to the next slide. I talk about all these organizations that have come together. The private sector, businesses, companies, organizations, and entities, and yet they are all structured and all have their own reporting requirements. And so the magic, I think, of what we've achieved over the last 18 months is an amazing cohesiveness and collaboration in which no one really cares about the name of the entity or who we represent. It's about getting the job done and finding the recommendations we can make to this body to say, how do we go about bringing those changes that we want to see? It's also about shared responsibilities will only achieve the shared opportunities that we seek. And it's not just our role, it's all of our collective roles, including straight conversations with companies and saying, you have a role in terms of the right culture, you have a role in terms of the right commitment to training, and you have a role to play in terms of the right compensation and benefit packages to attract that workforce. That straight talk cut across all of our organizations is really one of the driving forces of what we're attempting to bring to this equation. Let's go to the next slide, Jamie. I think at the end of the day, it's important for me at least to understand and to convey to you, we still have a long way to go. But I want to compliment all of these groups. I want to compliment all of you, the governor. I have never been involved in a more interesting, but in a more important topic in which everyone is coming together to say, how do we truly make a difference? We are creating jobs in the manufacturing environment that in some cases they're wearing white coats and using laptops. We are seeing companies that can't find people to fill certain roles. They're being forced to really invest in automation. We're seeing industries transforming. And I think it's because of that, while we have great opportunities, we do have a need to figure a way that we come together to work together to make this happen. And let me just also share that I think we also have to come together and help companies do what they need to do to figure out where they are in that process and where we are in that process to help them. If they're simply trying to find a workforce and they're doing the promotion and attraction, well, that's one element in which one group of our team members should be working directly with them. If they're trying to figure out how to put about training to help regroup and to take their current team to a new level, well, that involves differing folks that are part of the SWAT team. If we're talking about individuals that are trying to target those some 40,000 high school students in Kentucky, or there are some 20,000 young people that are going to college that choose not to return, How do we get them into the workforce and give them the opportunities that they deserve? This is a complex issue that no one-size-fits-all solution. And that's one of the reasons SWAT has come together with a voluntary group of organizations and passionate leaders that says we have to find a better way of creating systems and processes to cut across all the boundaries of the organizations we represent. And most importantly, we have to find a way that all companies, and whether it's the 250 companies that employ 500 or more, that requires a different kind of strategy than the 2,000 companies that employ around 100 individuals. We have to find those strategies, and we have to do it across this unique entity we call SWAT. And at the end of the day, there really is just one accomplishment. Let's help make sure that our neighbors in Kentucky have a choice to determine what they want to do with their lives, where they can go do it, and where they can be properly compensated and trained to be productive and successful. And if we do that, one of the outcomes is that we help take care of our existing companies and new companies to find that talent they need to be successful.
Good morning, and I don't have any other slides like Secretary Knoll did, so you're just going to have to look at two of me for a few minutes. It is great to be here this morning. Thank you so much for having us. I think Secretary Link and Secretary Knoll really laid out why we have this SWAT team approach. And I wanted to talk for just a few minutes about why it's so important for the Chamber, which is the state's largest business association, to be part of this team-based, employer-based approach. We represent thousands of members from all parts of the state in every single one of your districts. And the one thing that all of them have in common is that they're all struggling with workforce. Like Secretary Link said, we know that Kentucky has a low workforce participation rate. We have had for many years. We are currently in the bottom 10 in terms of workforce participation. And so this is the reason that everything the Chamber does, whether it's programming, policy, if any of our team comes to talk to you about legislation, everything really centers around, for the Chamber, the goal of growing our workforce. Our fear that is if this problem persists, that it'll slow our economy and it will prevent Kentucky from future economic development opportunities, of which we've had so many in the last couple of years. We recently found that about 75% of businesses in Kentucky are struggling to find the talent they need for their open jobs. And we really believe from the Chamber that this SWAT team-based, employer-based approach will help us coordinate all of our efforts. Though we're here in the Capitol, and I think a lot of times we talk about politics and legislation, I think we all can agree that workforce should not and is not political. We are hoping that these seeds that we are planting right now with SWAT, where all of our key partners are meeting monthly, we're communicating about businesses that we're all working with, and really triaging the workforce needs of the employers through Kentucky, will sustain through any administration. We know that administrations come and go, and when that happens, change happens. And change happens a lot of times for businesses across the Commonwealth. But this really, the sustainability and this consistency for businesses is really key for the Chamber. We're really proud to be part of this approach as we work to have a collective impact, and we focus on workforce alignment throughout the Commonwealth. This is already in the last year or so where we've been meeting has allowed us to better understand businesses' needs to prepare our Kentuckians for the current and the future jobs here in Kentucky. And as you know, I think many of you guys are involved in your local chambers of commerce. We in Kentucky are really fortunate that we have about 100 local chambers of commerce all across the state. And so we're really excited about pulling them into this approach as well. So it's not just workforce from Frankfort, where we're kind of saying in Frankfort what the rest of the state should be doing. We'll be working with our local workforce partners all over the state on this approach. So we're really happy to kind of be in the planting of the seeds of this process. And before we got started, Secretary Knoll and I were talking, and we said so many different groups do workforce. If we pulled everyone that did workforce in Kentucky, we would absolutely fill this room, but we might even fill this whole annex. And so I think if you think about your local areas and everyone that does workforce in just your areas, this is really why this kind of centered-based, team-based approach is really needed. So thank you all for having me, and I think I'll turn it over to Dr. Thompson. Or Dr.
Dr. Ryan go first.
Thank you, and good morning. Great to be back in front of so many friends and colleagues. This work group started well before I arrived at KCTCS. So I parachuted in on January 1st, and thanks to the hard work of our staff at KCTCS and their counterparts as well, the bottom line is that we have a lot of people involved in our state that help with economic development and particularly business recruitment. I'm a strong believer that this SWOT framework helps reduce redundancy, reduce duplication across the state, and also improves the intake of companies that are choosing the Commonwealth either to locate, to expand, or most importantly, decide to stay here. And so what's happening across our state? Well, I might get a phone call from a company that says, we need more help with our community college, with our upskilling of our workers that currently are with us. The secretary may be working with that company as well, and we may not know that. Same thing with the chamber. And so one thing that we're trying to do here is have a more systematic, reduced redundancy approach towards economic development. And then on the business recruitment side, if President Watts gets a call from a company, she knows which counterparts she needs to talk to. And in my case, the company needs a highly educated, skilled workforce. It's going to be siphoned over to me. So it's really about a more strategic, unified approach towards economic development. We have a lot of tools in the toolbox. I like to say KCTCS is the biggest tool in the toolbox for economic development just because of our size and our footprint. You know, just this past year, we had 88,000 Kentuckians go through our programs to upskill themselves, many of which are on the front end. They're coming to us because they want to start a career. Some of those are coming to us on the back end where the employer says, hey, we just purchased a new piece of equipment. We don't have the training materials available for that. So they hire us to actually go to that company and provide the education. We're also a collaborator. We work with anybody that wants to improve their local community. We take a lot of value in that. We're also the starting point for a lot of Kentuckians that want to go on and get that 4-year college degree, Dr. Thompson, which we need more people doing. But a lot of Kentuckians are starting their career with as little as 4 weeks with us. 4 weeks to get a CDL license and have a new job driving a truck. 15 weeks with us, you can become a lineman or linewoman and work with our utility companies, have starting salaries of $60,000 or $70,000 a year. So we have a lot of great programs, but we just need to better align them with the other strategic forces in our state to make us as strong of an economy as possible. We're really thankful that you all have funded the Work Ready Scholarship. Again, that's a last dollar scholarship that goes to individuals studying programs that represent high demand job growth areas. We're also thankful for you all funding the Trains program as well. That's money that companies can access to help us upskill their current employees as well. But the last comment I'll make here is that we are doing a self-evaluation of KCTCS right now due to the joint direction that you all at my office have made with a joint resolution. So we're going to be coming back to you in December with a KCTCS reset plan, one that really focuses on workforce development. But we need to make sure that our workforce piece aligns with what they're working on as well to, again, avoid duplication. And we also need to make sure that the programs that we offer align with the workforce needs of Kentucky, which includes having the ability to ramp up and be nimble for new industries that may be coming to our state, but also in higher education, have the ability to sunset programs that are perhaps less relevant or have no impact on our Commonwealth as well. So with that, glad to be with you all and glad to be part of this working group. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, committee. I want to set this up about the reason why it is important. I know you know some of these data and some of these facts already, but I'll just line it up. When we talk to employers that want to come to the state or want to stay in the state, the number one item they want, more than a tax incentive, is that they have a highly educated workforce. And what we also know is that you cannot build and sustain an economy unless you have that highly educated workforce that's building into sustainable employment. And what we do also know is that 2 out of 10 people now working are not in a sustainable job. So when we think about where we're going and how we need to look at this SWOT, we have to look at it both from a sustainability viewpoint of those that we have and what we need to have in the future. The issues we have currently, as you all know, I've been in healthcare for a while, but those jobs, we have 8,600 jobs open. 4,000 of those are nurses. And in order to build that, what we need now to keep our economy going and to not let hospitals and other healthcare agencies spend tons of money on traveling nurses when another pandemic happens, or just now, we have to think about how we build that pipeline. The other thing that we know too, that we look at data, that's why we have in higher education as a whole this 60% attainment by 2030, that just wasn't pulled out of the sky. What we know that in Kentucky, you at least will have to have a workforce certificate from KCTCS or above 63% by 2030 in order to sustain what we have going on now. It's going to take 90% by 2030 to actually move this up farther. And this is not just only what we're doing in our 2-year system, but also what we're doing with our 4-year degrees, because employers are telling us they need a variety of folk to come in, many with 4-year degrees, to get where we need to go. Some of the other points that I want to point out is that as we design a system of workforce participation, I will call it, we have to think of all of our institutions, no matter what. I know we talk about college and career all the time. I just want to talk about career, because K-12 and colleges and universities are no more than that conduit to a sustainable career. I know of no one coming to college that didn't want a good job afterwards. The other thing, and I've talked to hundreds of, probably thousands of employers now, and they tell us still the number one item that they need, other than a highly educated, trained workforce, will be a workforce that knows how to participate once they get there. In other words, they're asking for employability skills, such as how to show up to work on time, and a variety of other items that they need to have in place. So what we're doing in Kentucky now, all of our 2-year and 4-year universities and colleges are participating in our graduate profile, where we're infusing this in the curriculum, those 10 essential skills that employers have identified. Now, they actually identified 9 of those. We threw civic engagement and democracy in because we felt that all of our students need to have that as they go and participate in our society. The item that I would argue in the SWAT that you all have been a part of, like with the healthcare law, HB 200, as well as the aerospace aeronautics, is that we can build this pipeline with intentionality. And that's what this SWAT is about. As we go and recruit new businesses, we better make sure that we are not just giving them what they need now, but as we are projecting what they're going to need. So our new program approval and review policy takes into account that. Have you talked to employers about what they need in the future? We're building more employer advisory groups on our campuses to work with us on the front end of building curriculum and not on the back end of just coming in at career fairs hoping we got somebody prepared for it. So there's a whole lot more I can talk about, but the item that I will tell you is that we are in this thing together, and we can't help but to be. To have the silos we once had just doesn't work anymore. It has never really worked. But the idea of bringing, not just for efficiency's sake, all of us together to look at where we need to go, where we're at now, and how we need to go about making sure we accomplish both of those, is to think long term of how we sustain this when many of us may not be here down the road. So with that, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
And I want to be sensitive to the time, Mr. Chairman, to kind of wrap it all up. This is a common goal for all of us that we're trying to achieve. I think 2 of the major factors in my mind are awareness, making sure that employers and the people of the Commonwealth know the services that are available to them. We're somewhat restricted by federal funds on what we can do in terms of advertising and marketing. So the ability to get the word out to people and reach them where they are, Secretary Knoll mentioned having job fairs and people coming to you. We need to go to them. So how do we reach them, and what resources do we need to be able to make people aware? Likewise, how do we help employers know what services are available to them? Because we want to make it as easy on the employers as possible. In most cases, our hope is that they have one point of contact, that they don't have to call multiple different agencies at the local and state level trying to find assistance for their workforce needs. They have one person that they contact, and that one person knows the other resources that are available and can point them to them, or have that resource contact that employer. The other term is collaboration. That's been the overall theme here, that these organizations are working together. What's the old saying? If you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you're going to get the same results. We're trying to break that paradigm, and we're trying to work together rather than individual silos, sharing resources and sharing information so that we can better affect the outcomes for employers and for the people seeking help. And we talk about the different constituencies that we're trying to reach. Young people are certainly a key population that we need to reach both in high school and in post-secondary education. But we also talk about transitioning veterans, soldiers who are leaving military service and looking for their next step in their career. We want them to stay in Kentucky or to come to Kentucky. We have major initiatives now going with reentry and recovery populations. For those who are criminal justice involved or substance abuse, we want to help them get on the right path to a good, sustainable job. Vocational rehabilitation. You've heard some presentations from vocational rehabilitation about the number of people in the Commonwealth that have some disability but are very qualified for jobs. How do we help them find the jobs that they can do and help those employers who need that expertise? The immigrant and refugee populations. Many of your districts may have significant populations of immigrants and refugees. How do we help those people who may not speak English very well but have a world of talent? How do we make them, how do we connect them more with employers who need those skills? And then some of the discussion over the past few years have been people on social benefits, on government benefits. We talk with the Cabinet for Health and Family Services when people apply for Medicaid. There's a question on their application, are you looking for work? And if they answer yes to that question, that information comes to us and we reach out to them. How can we help you find a job? And the same is true for other benefits programs in unemployment insurance. You know, as soon as someone walks in to file an unemployment insurance claim, we reach out to them, how can we help you find work? So that's the goal. And with that, Secretary Knoll mentioned we want to be a resource not only to the administration but to the General Assembly. This is what we do, and we want to share our information and our knowledge with you if it helps you set policy and determine how resources are allocated, because that's going to be the future of what we're doing here. And it's our goal that workforce participation rate will increase to levels we've not seen for several years. So with that, I think we'll be happy to take any questions that the committee members may have.
Thank you all, and thank you for the presentation. We do have a number of members who have signed up here for questions, and I just want to commend you, Secretary Link. You and I have spoken quite frequently on. I'm a big proponent of collaboration and making sure that we're efficient and not duplicating services. So I really appreciate this group getting together and trying to be efficient. One question I have, and Secretary Knoll, this may be a little bit more for you. How can you just briefly give us an idea of the flow of information? So let's say a business is wanting to come into Kentucky, or there's an existing business looking at expanding or needing some training. How does that? Can you tell us kind of the flow of information amongst the group there?
Yeah, in order to try to answer it, I'll quickly discuss when we have a prospect in town and we're trying to convince them that they should make that investment here, and I'll correlate that then in when a company's looking to do an expansion as well, because they actually have an intersection. Where our attempt is when we bring those companies in, we work directly with the local economic developer, who then puts together a team that includes the local workforce investment organization, someone from President Quarles's organization, in some cases someone who is actively working at Fort Campbell as an example to help share what's there, and someone from the local high school. And we set aside an appropriate period of time to allow each of those entities to present how they work and how they work together. And then we close out that presentation by really providing data as to where we believe the workforce is in that particular area, what the commuting patterns are, what kind of talent and skills, so that we can directly say to that company, here's what you can look to in terms of that pool to draw from for your workforce. And then hopefully when you hear the music of Road to the Final Four and we're told we're in the cut for, maybe getting the project, and then ultimately we find that we have been awarded the project, we do an immediate follow-up, bring those folks back together, and begin a process in which we work together with the company as they start to both get ready to come in, build, invest, and then start to onboard their talent in terms of where they go. Now, this is where I think sometimes the handoff can be even better. Every organization, every entity stays involved with those companies. And I think, candidly, sometimes we don't do a good enough job holding the company accountable because sometimes their people change and we have to start all over. But the work is to attempt to try to create a process-driven approach where we're there working with that company every step along the way so that about 6 to 7 months before they become operational, we are actively working to design the kind of training opportunities that they're going to need, actually start to identify their key personnel they're going to have, and we actually share with all companies. If you're going to use an agency or a third party for your workforce, you will not be successful. And secondly, the sooner you can find 2 or 3 key people from the community to put on your team, the better you're going to be. So this work then continues on, Representative Branscombe, in terms of helping that company get up and running throughout the process. And all the agencies do a great job, I think, working together. But like any kind of systemic approach, there can be breakdowns in the process. And I think therein lies, I could give you some of those stories where the key person for the company has changed, or there wasn't really enough thought given to the kind of skill sets they need to be successful, and did we design the kind of attraction efforts with the right resources to try to bring in a pool that would be more susceptible to being successful based on that criteria. Sometimes we all jump forward to try to get easy solutions as opposed to really building that process with the company. And so I guess the best answer I can give to you is it's a very messy process, but it really works when we can have a process where we meet every 2 weeks, we have all the right players that are on the call together trying to support that company, and everybody brings their toolbox together, and there's an open door in which we're trying to figure out how to design and build the system. But it's, like I said, it's messy and it's time consuming. Now let me go over to an existing business. Therein lies, I think, where we need to build more of those same similar types of processes, because in some cases, companies choose to go it alone, and then when they hit the panic button, we all triage and come in and try to figure out how to help them. And in some cases, we sit around and we're explaining all of our programs as opposed to taking a step back and saying, let's try to figure out what we're trying to accomplish and how do we build that systemic approach to get there. And what we have seen is the more we can find the problem solver and the one that helps design the process and then define the roles for each entity to play, the more successful those companies can be in finding and bringing on their talent. And the last step to this question is, I think it's also important to understand this is a process. And we have discovered that if we're not routinely touching base with those companies regularly to find out where they are and what they're attempting to do and where their needs happen to be, the systems break down again, and then it becomes panic mode as opposed to really trying to take advantage of the process. And I believe very strongly that we have to get our companies to understand there is a short-term need, short-term solutions, there's a midterm need, midterm solutions, and there's just as much need for long-term solutions, and therefore they should be involved with local business education partnerships, trying to grow that talent from within. We don't do enough of that straight talk and have enough of our programs that kind of break it down that way, and in some cases hold the companies accountable to make sure they're interacting with all of our resources with that kind of a mindset.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll start off with some questions here. Representative Gentry.
Is that okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Boy, this is great seeing you five here, and I could sit here for 30 minutes and ask questions, but I won't, Mr. Chair.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. When I saw the agenda, I got giddy. I felt like a little kid on Christmas Eve, and it's because this is awesome. This is something that should be standard procedure in states. Unfortunately, it hasn't been. And the fact that you're together now, I think the number one mission and objective should be to stay together and make it standard procedure moving forward. Because, you know, when I see a group like this, I see on on the horizon, production coming, new systems, new structures, because of collaboration in all the areas that are really important in workforce. You know, you have Ashley sitting there in the middle with businesses bring the jobs in. You have Jamie here representing the labor department. You have Jeff here who's going out getting those businesses to bring their operations here. And then you have the two basic trainers of our future workforce sitting on either side. So this is awesome. But a question, I'm getting to my question, I promise you, Mr. Chair. As it relates to the world of Kentuckians with disabilities, I know you hear me talk about this off and on over the years. We've created a caucus here that has taken a long time to get rolling. We started getting rolling, and then COVID came and knocked us off balance, and the next thing we knew, we had a whole bunch of new people that we had to try to bring in and find out within our little caucus of who the leaders were going to be in this area. Representative Sharp has stepped up and is going to be my new and we're going to get things done here. So my question is, when we create these new systems and structures to address our workforce needs for the future, what are we doing, or do we have individuals that are focused on this space or this area with putting people with disabilities to work and beyond vocational rehab? Do we have somebody that we're thinking about focusing on that we can work with? Because what I've seen here in the disability world is a lot of siloed type structure. Okay, they all have their own little needs, and there's not a whole lot of collaboration. Much like not different than what we've seen in the past with this. And what I've tried to do behind the scenes is try to help collaborate that whole, what I call advocacy group, so that they can come to us more and relay what their real needs are. Now I know there are high incidences of people with disabilities in Kentucky. I know that many of them are unemployed. And I know this is a smaller sector compared to the whole workforce, but it's important. When you put a person with disabilities in a workplace, production goes up. Maybe not from that individual, but what really drives production, and it will drive it in every one of you, I know, is when you accomplish something that you've worked really hard on, your first thought after that is, hell yeah, I want to go do it again, you know? And when somebody does that in a place where they're challenged and they do it with a smile and they show up to work every day, all of a sudden all the little problems in the co-workers that they deal with on a daily basis start going away, and they're inspired. So the more we can make that happen, it helps society in general, not only the work places. And I'm rambling on, and I'm sorry, but the question again is there anybody focused in this area in y'all's group here, probably more toward Jamie, but really all of you need to be focused on this. And if so, if not, can we create that some way where we could be a link to the legislators or caucus to help move this along quicker?
I can take the first jump at this, and I completely agree, Representative Gentry. And yesterday, a couple of our team members testified before the Veterans and Military Affairs Committee on our Military Hiring Academy. Some of you all may be familiar with the Chamber Foundation's Hiring Academy model. So we've done this before with Fair Chance Hiring, we've done Military Hiring Academy, and our next Hiring Academy is going to be around Kentuckians with disabilities and making sure that they're included in the workforce. So we're going to take the chamber side of this, the employer side, and really train employers employers on how to make sure they are able to accept that population, some small accommodations that might need to be made to make sure they really have this very talented pool of workers. And so we'll be getting in touch with you soon, but expect that from us in 2025. We're partnering with the University of Kentucky on that. And I think that's the beauty of this model as well, is that we're meeting really in person every single month, but we're talking on a very regular basis, the 5 of us. And so we'll be including all of our partners in on this as well. And I'll definitely follow up with you and get some advice and maybe have you come speak to that academy. Those academies that we've been having have trained hundreds of employers over the last 2 years on how to kind of accept this pool of population, whether that is fair chance, whether that's military. We're going to do one around new Kentuckians, which I know I've talked to Representative Kulkarni about as well. So we'd love to talk to you more about that. But from the employer perspective, that's a programmatic thing that we're doing, a little bit aside from policy. So we'll definitely follow up on that with you.
And to follow up, obviously the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation is under the Education Labor Cabinet. And I don't want to misstate any statistics, but they appeared yesterday before another committee, and Voc Rehab serves tens of thousands of people every year. And as a result, thousands of those people become employed. And one number that stuck out to me was they're employed at a rate of about $21.31, I believe, an hour. So they're talented people, and they just need some assistance, and they need that connection to employers to put them together. But I think the system is the same that we've been talking about here. It's both at the local, it's at the nonprofit, and it's at the state level. We all have to work in collaboration with one another, not just across our organizations, but through the vertical between the local and state, that when an employer, and educating employers about what the disabled community can do, the talents they have, that they are good employees and productive employees, that's a very rich resource that we have, and we really need to tap it as much as we can.
And I appreciate that, Jamie. And let me just end by saying vocational rehab does a lot of great work and has gotten a lot better in recent years as awareness has picked up in this area. So I have been paying attention to that, and I'm very appreciative of that. And I would be more interested in talking to some people over there about counting mechanisms. And I'm really more referring to the sector of people with this. There's a wide range of people with disabilities at various different impairment levels. But some of what we would refer to in the workers' comp world is permanently partially disabled. I'm not too sure we have really good counting mechanisms there. If they're not on government aid, most of them aren't. And if they're not injured on the job, which would fall under workers' compensation, so there's a good counting mechanism there. But there's a sector of people that are out there that struggle with employment, and they don't really have anybody advocating for them beyond themselves.
Right.
If they're not in that injured worker type scenario. So anything we can do in those areas to help out, and I don't know what the answers are, but when we get together and we have discussions and we start collaborating and we recognize what the challenges are, there's usually some sort of solutions that follow after that. So I'm done, and thank you for the time,
All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Just want to remind the members, we still have 6 members with questions, so let's keep it moving. Senator Funky Fromeyer.
Thank you, Chairperson. I really appreciate these dynamic leaders sitting here at the table. So here's a challenge, and I would love to know how you're going to help us tackle this. In Pendleton County, Hammer Strength has made a decision to head back to their headquarters and leave Pendleton County with about 120 quality skilled workers. How does the SWAT team now come in and recognize, here we've got 120 people. They're eager to work. They're beginning the process now of getting pink slips, and I appreciate your efforts to try to retain them in Kentucky. It didn't happen. How can the SWAT team tackle this issue? And also, how can we stay accountable? As you mentioned, Secretary Link, the recognition is we need to stay in touch with them, but they almost need a point person. And we need a point person there, and we need a point person on the SWAT team that's constantly checking in to make sure we're on track. We can't afford to have 120 more unemployed people in Pendleton County, but we need your help. So how can you help us?
Senator, my initial response would be for those types of situations, we have a rapid response effort with the local workforce board and with state resources to address those employees and helping them get on unemployment insurance. That doesn't address your question, but I think we need that
We
same
want
kind of
to
effort.
attract all these employers. I
Right.
want employers competing for these 100 skilled.
Right.
I see it just the opposite. I would like to see the efforts to get the employers attracted to this absolutely fabulous place to live.
Well, I think that could be where, when they file for unemployment insurance, given this circumstance, that's where we have to communicate with the Economic Development Cabinet, with the Chamber and others, to bring those employers in, identify those employers who may have openings or need those resources. And I'll defer to my colleagues, too, for their input as well.
Yes, Senator, I'll chime in real quick. And just us knowing this from the chamber perspective is very helpful. Here in Kentucky, we do have about 1.5 jobs for every one person looking. So in these kind of situations, what we can do is kind of talk to our other chamber members, especially in that area, because most people do not want to relocate when something like this happens, and let them know that this has happened. A lot of employers are going to already know this has happened and hopefully kind of go in and see if any of these employees would like to come on board with them. But just us knowing that, we can then take it back to our chamber members, our local chamber in that area, and let them know that there is a group of over 100 skilled workers that are going to be needing for jobs, and hopefully they can come in and start working with them.
I think in all candor, from my perspective, that's exactly why SWAT was created. We need to do a better job in this space, and I just need to also put a commercial out there, if I may. The company is leaving Kentucky and closing out of Pendleton County, not because of the workforce, but because they had two other facilities that had excess capacity, and they had to make a business decision to consolidate, and it was a business decision. They were very, very clear, best workforce they had was in Kentucky, and I think that goes back to why SWAT should and was created. I think we can do more and should do more. First of all, best practice is you typically get a set of job skills from Hammer Strength to tell us what kind of people do you have and what do they have, so that we can memorialize that in a little bit, work with the chamber, work with Jamie, and actually share that listing of talent skills that are available with area employers. It's a simple thing to do, simple thing to get it mailed out. I think we've got to find a way of designing that kind of a program immediately, because that's our best asset to helping companies in the nearby area grow and expand. I think another thing that can be done and should be done is ask the company, and I will do that, and it should have already been done, so it's completely on me, is how do we create their point person, and we find our point person, and we actually go out here, and in some cases we invite any company that's within a 45-minute to 60-minute drive point to come in and participate in some sort, not a job fair, but in kind of a meeting opportunity with meeting some of those employees that should be paid by Hammer Strength to come to that session and meet some of those folks. That's one of those best practice opportunities, I think, that we need to engage in. And quite candidly, that's why, and I'm not trying to make excuses or apologies, I think that's why SWAT was created, so that we could go through these, have you ask those questions, and we come back and say, okay, we have a SWAT response group. They've already been in touch with the company. Is it really operating the way it should? What else could we do in a collaborative way? And then I'll close it out by talking about defining responsibilities, and this is again on me. We're in the process of trying to take our blueprint and encourage all of our local economic developers to know what their role is. And I believe that the person that should be on point in a situation like this, well, I call it the tangential point, is either the local chamber head or the local economic developer, together making sure we at the state level are providing those services and those support to help take care of their neighbors. And you know what? Our job, and we're going to take this, thank you for bringing it up, this is one of the things I think SWAT should talk about at the next level. How do we formalize this and make it much more of a way in which our answers are shorter, and I'm sorry, but our answers give you exactly how this process works. I think it's working. I think some of those things we're talking about are happening, but we need to make sure that systemically it's being done in the way we all want it to be done.
Thank you, Secretary Knoll. And I have gotten some very good responses from our Northern Kentucky Area Development District and working closely with our judge executive there. I'm just a little surprised that we don't have a double down effort of showcasing this fabulous piece of property, this fabulous equipment that's in place. I mean, all the way around. Rural living has caught on. People love it. And you're right, they don't want to leave that area, and they don't want to be lured necessarily by another employer. Our desire for tax dollars, we want employers coming into Pendleton, not sending the employees out of Pendleton.
Senator Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I guess I'll to maybe piggyback a little bit off of Senator Fromeyer and maybe back up from where I was initially planning to start. And I guess maybe this this question would be focused somewhat on the chamber and what. And I guess it's not so much I'm concerned about the Kentucky Chamber. I think you all are doing what you can to attract jobs to Kentucky. But, you know, the National Chamber is one of the chief proponents of outsourcing good-paying jobs to other countries. And, you know, I think that we have seen with the passage of like NAFTA, many of these trade deals, what Ross Perot described in the early 90s as just giant sucking sound south of the border that has taken away a lot of good-paying American manufacturing jobs, which at one time made us the engine of democracy that allowed us to build the tanks, the planes, the material that won the Second World War, the Korean War, and numerous other conflicts. We have now found, especially during the COVID pandemic, that these policies that were implemented and advocated for mainly by the National Chamber have put us in a perilous position as far as our national security, to the point we couldn't even get paper masks in the United States because they're all produced in China. And what are you all doing on a state basis to discourage these bad policies that are being advocated by the National Chamber of Commerce?
Thank you. And I will speak for the Kentucky Chamber and not for the National Chamber, because that's, of course, the organization that I oversee and I run day to day. I really think, Senator, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. I think we have done a really good job the last couple of years of onshoring and reshoring and bring, manufacturers back here. But for some manufacturers, trade does work. And so when you look at administrations, whether that's Republican or Democrat, there have been trade policies over time. The last, the NAFTA renegotiations was, of course, under President Trump and led that effort as well. I think it's really kind of different policies work for different businesses, and not every business works exactly the same. But from the Kentucky Chamber perspective, we're working every single day with our friends at Economic Development to bring more and more businesses to Kentucky and to bring those jobs here home.
Now, do you sit on the National Chamber board?
I do serve on the
Okay,
National
and do you
Chamber
all
board.
kind of advocate for these types of policies to reshore American jobs here? I mean, is that a primary focus of the state chambers of commerce? I mean, I would think that it's imperative that we would have our local voice that would oppose policies that essentially send American jobs away, while, and like I said, these were good paying jobs with health insurance, with benefits that, pension plans, and that allowed, frankly, stable American families, which goes to some of the other issues that we heard about, like we have to teach them to get on time to work. I mean, how asinine is that if a college or a trade school actually has to teach people how to show up to work on time? I mean, that's just idiotic. I mean, it's almost like it's hard for me to be sit up here and not turn 5 shades of red just hearing something like that. But then again, I guess it also would go to my second point, and I guess this would be directed at my good friend, President Quarles and our President Thompson. I mean, I think higher education in many ways has failed the youth of America over the last 40 to 50 years. I mean, it's saddled them with trillions of dollars of debt with degrees that really have not brought them to any higher standard of living. They'll graduate from college with $100,000 or $150,000 in debt and can't find any job that meets the skill set that they've come out with. And what I find is, and I'm speaking maybe my local hometown, just to get a stonemason to come out, maybe going back to Secretary Knoll talking about President Quarles' dad teaching shop. We used to have a shop at Pikeville High School where I went. It's gone now, and I think it was replaced by a computer lab. And I won't say that I ever took to it real well. I think my mom still has a little sconce I made on the wall in the carpentry class. But it taught some basic skills that are completely lacking in our economy. And I think if you show up on any major job site in Kentucky, I don't know how far English is really going to get you with that workforce there. There aren't Kentuckians out there that you see on a lot of these places. I was recently called by one of my county judges that a solar farm that went into that is being built in Martin County, which I think the county judge said he signed an industrial development bond or something. The people promised that they were going to hire at least half of the local workforce locally. It's less than 50 people, and everybody else is just, like I said, half of them don't even speak English that they bring up there to build these sites. I think corporate America has really failed working class people in the last 50 years. And we're having a lot of societal problems because of it, including drugs and things like this, because people lack hope. So what are you all going to do to provide jobs to maybe the people that aren't really ready for college? How are we going to do that, and how are we going to provide those jobs in rural America? We used to have them. I came from what was once the energy capital of the United States. We were a coal mining region. Hard work, but paid well and had benefits. Then you have the power companies that want to go green. And we have a direct government attack on this workforce in our area, and it's caused mass devastation and societal displacement. What are we going to do to fight against these policies that are essentially attacking the American workforce?
I'm sorry.
I'll jump in first, and I'll turn it to my friends in higher ed just to address some of your earlier comments. I think when you talk about trade and onshoring, it's not an either or, it's a both and. We are living in a global economy. The U.S. is the largest and strongest economy of the world, and we have to keep that in mind. We know that trade works for a lot of businesses here in Kentucky and nationally. Here in Kentucky, Canada is our top trade partner. That's an important relationship that our businesses here in Kentucky rely on. So I think when you talk about trade and reshoring and onshoring, it's not so simple as to say either or. For us, it's really both and, knowing that we need more jobs here in Kentucky. We want to grow Kentucky's economy. Growth is what we are about at the Kentucky Chamber. But we also know that in the age of a global economy, we have to compete, and we have to make sure that we have those important trade partners.
I want to address the higher ed piece as much as I can. First of all, I'll speak only for Kentucky. In the last 5 years, we have gone from 59% of our students borrowing money now to 42%, with an average of $26,000 in Kentucky. We also have it decreased 26% of those that are in situations whereby they're not getting jobs and being able to pay that back. So those numbers you give doesn't apply to Kentucky as much. Now, I would argue very clearly this point, that if someone borrows and they get a job that can pay that, then I think that's an investment. I also believe that we have to be more upfront, like we did with the student right to know, to let students know exactly how much you should borrow for this major, what is the average income for this major once you get that major. We have to do that more. We have to do better financial aid counseling, no doubt. But the piece that I think is also important, you mentioned rural, I just will say that there's a whole, as you all know, I'm from Eastern Kentucky too, there's a whole lot of work that we have to do in our inner cities and in our rural places. A whole lot of work we have to do around disabilities. By the way, didn't have a chance to answer your question, but we now have incorporated that as part of our strategic agenda. We're going to have to look at males. I know we don't want to talk a lot about that, but look at what's happening in Kentucky, especially in our rural portions and inner cities. There are things that we have to strategically target. Affordability was the item that was number one in our agenda to actually do that, and I feel very good. Now, our campuses all have a Promise program. You go to Dr. Quarles' campus, you can even go free for most items. So at least in Kentucky, we are changing that narrative around affordability, and I'm proud of that.
America needs more people who work with their hands. And that's where our community and technical colleges are playing a big role. And you're right, there is an unfortunate narrative that is propped up about the value of higher education. Americans are openly questioning, why should I go to a school for 4 or more years to get a degree that may or may not have relevancy to the job you're looking for, and then be saddled by student loan debt? That is not the case at our community technical colleges. We're half the price of a traditional 4-year, but we're also providing opportunities for Kentuckians that do not want to go to a 4-year college. We're going to get you in and get you out. And I think that, speaking of hands, the invisible hand of Kentucky's economy is speaking to us, because the salaries are great because of the shortages of people that can be stonemasons, electricians, welders. And so one of the things that we need to do as a society is get rid of the unfortunate stigma that is unfairly attached to trades and technical programs, that we should have just as much respect for the Kentuckian who comes home with dirt and grease on their clothes than the Kentuckian that comes home wearing a suit and tie. And that's something we're all going to have to do, including working with our high school counselors to encourage students to choose a technical degree. Because we know that not everyone needs to go to a 4-year college. We know that. But we need more people doing that. But at the same time, the narrative that you, I think, aptly described is simply not the case at our community colleges. And the cool thing is that Gen Z is starting to see that you can have a starting salary with no debt after 2 or less years of study. And every week I get to meet a student whose starting salary, sometimes at age 20, is $80,000 a year, $90,000 a year. In some cases, a $100,000 starting salary at age 20, because they're not afraid to get dirt on their boots and grease on their elbows. And we need to correct and eliminate that stigma, not just in Kentucky, but nationwide.
Thank you all. Members, we have 4 remaining with questions and a presentation after this. So I just want to remind everyone, Representative King.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll do my best to give an example of a concise question. The 1-point contact that you mentioned in your presentation is intriguing. Is that contact information in the slide deck? And that is my question.
No, Representative King, I think the concept that we've been working with is that with our shared resources and our statewide coverage, that could be someone from the Education and Labor Cabinet, it could be someone from KCTCS, it could be someone from the Chamber, or the local workforce boards or local chambers or local economic developers. We want that employer to have one person, ideally, that they contact. And it could be someone from any of our organizations, but that person knows what resources are standing behind them that they can contact and put in touch with that employer to address that employer's needs. Does that make sense? Okay.
Representative Duval.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here today. We have a dream team in front of us here, and your job is not easy, and so I thank you for what you do. Secretary Link, my question is really for you. You mentioned one of the key components to moving the needle in workforce participation is an awareness. And so I agree 100% with that. Kentucky has a lot to offer. And so you also mentioned, though, that there are some restrictions on marketing and advertising. So I'd like to know what those restrictions are, and then also what can we do despite those restrictions?
Well, I didn't want to come here asking for money. That's not the purpose of our appearance here. You get enough of that all the time. Yeah, but in our cabinet, our federal grants, they allow outreach, but they do not allow marketing and advertising. I've had difficulty getting definitions of how they view these 3 different components. And the fear we have is if we do something, and we're audited constantly, that they come in and we've spent $100,000 on what we consider outreach, and the auditors say, no, that's really marketing, and you need to pay us that money back. So we're very guarded about how we spend those federal resources on outreach. And we're trying to be as creative as we can and as appropriate as we can. But we're seeing other states that are making direct appropriations from state funds for workforce development, recruitment, and retention. And again, that's letting the employers know what services are available to them to help with their workforce needs, as well as helping the job seekers know, do they need a skills assessment? What kind of training do they need? Where might they have that match with an employer? And they just don't know. And as I mentioned, the days of hoping people come into our career centers or come into other local workforce boards and things and waiting for that, we need to be more proactive and identify who they are and go get them. So that's going to take some resources, and we'd be happy to have a further conversation with you about that if you'd be interested.
Absolutely. I think that's much needed. Thank
Okay. Glad to.
Representative Cole Carney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to be brief as well. Thank you all for your presentation. I'm sure I, like most of my colleagues on this committee, are very glad to hear that you are working as a team to eliminate silos, to reduce inefficiencies. And really, I'm particularly glad to hear of the focus on harnessing the existing workforce in Kentucky. Years ago, before I became a state representative, the discussion seemed to be about attracting talent to Kentucky from other states or from other countries. And now I'm glad to hear that we are focusing on, maybe because we have enough talent here, on individuals that are willing and able and really motivated to work. We just have to find ways to get there. That being said, I know each of your organizations have been around for a long time. You all have been around for a long time. We're asking, to me, it seems, the same kinds of questions. We're facing the same kinds of challenges in terms of how do we get outreach done quickly and more efficiently? How do we get the right people into the right jobs? So I'm glad to hear about the creation of pipelines. And I think pipelines for opportunity have to be created, and they have to have equal access for all Kentuckians. I will speak a little bit about our foreign-born population just because that's my background. I've had conversations, I think, with pretty much all of you about that particular segment of our workforce. They are diverse. Right, so I'll speak primarily to Louisville. We have the second largest Cuban population outside of Miami. That being said, the Asian population is the fastest growing nationwide, and in Kentucky, specifically Indian and Chinese nationals. Now, you have a great divide there between individuals that are coming here who speak English, who are highly educated. They have high degrees, right, master's degrees, PhDs. And then you have a population that's been displaced, who are refugees and parolees who didn't have time to come here with copies of certified transcripts or a diploma, or whatever they might have, who also have a lot of experience, Dr. Thompson, potentially in areas that we need, like nursing. So one of my questions is not just for that population, but any others that I heard you mention, including individuals with disabilities, as Representative Gentry was mentioning, veterans, individuals experiencing homelessness that are trying to transition out of that. The question is, A, how are you addressing challenges that are adjacent to some of the workforce populations? I'm glad that you all are eliminating silos within workforce agencies and departments specifically, but these individuals, all of them, whether they are immigrants, refugees, veterans, individuals with disabilities, or otherwise, including seniors and youth, might face issues with things like transportation, things like housing, things like just simply being connected to the employers in their communities that are searching for workforce and are not able to connect with these particular populations. So my first question is, how are you addressing that very specific issue of ancillary concerns? The second question I have is, how are you leveraging existing resources? Dr. Quarles, as you mentioned, our trades. How are you leveraging our unions and especially our licensure boards to look at individuals who may have a better capacity or be better fit for trades versus those who just need maybe a little bit more to finish their education or to get that license, and figure out how do we get them in the occupations that we have these, thousands and thousands of worker shortages in. I don't know if I was clear about the demarcation of my questions, but I think you're kind of understanding my question of how are you eliminating silos, not just within your workforce departments and agencies, but also outside, right, to deal with these ancillary issues? And how are you leveraging resources that exist in order to get those pipelines of opportunity to the people that need it, so that we're not training people for jobs they're not going to be able to fit into or be able to find in 10 years, in 20 years? How are we training them for the jobs of the future, and how are we connecting employers to the existing workforce that we have in Kentucky now?
Let me pick up the pipeline, because I think you actually hit the nail on the head, not only with immigrant populations, but with all of our populations. Right now we have 47.8% of our students graduating from high school going on to college, whether it's getting a workforce certificate or moving on. We've got to increase that. So that's a big issue for our workforce that we have to take into account. If we bring out-of-state students in, we need to keep about 40% of them working in Kentucky. Now, what have we done with immigrant populations? You also pointed out some very distinctive differences, right? So, for an example, if someone's coming in from Southeast Asia with a lot of education, how do we take that group and be able to, in a seamless way, look at their competencies and put them into place? We are now building out one of the best, hopefully, in the country, a way that we can look at competencies, measure it, and give them credit for it and move them straight into it. And working with employers in the healthcare industry, as an example, to work with us to do that. That's one of the big things that we're doing now. The other piece with the innovative scholarships that were designed for refugees, as you all know, that you last year gave us the second amount of money for. We also, in just getting those scholarships to refugees coming in, for them to have what they needed to get educated, to get to a point of where they are employed. But the other thing we did, we created a community of practice to talk about with many of those students or many of those folks that are fitting in there, what else do we need to do with those wraparound services to get you what you need to get there. I could go on for an hour on this, because there's so many of the things that you're rightly pointing out that we have to do on the front end to build it out. You know, it also goes to the fact that sometimes we paint everything one size fits all. Nothing ever fits in that setting, as you all know. And I think more of us who are focusing on exactly the interesting pieces from a viewpoint of not only education, culture, and a variety of other things we're bringing to the table, we can better prepare P12 and higher ed for that pipeline. The area where we have to do even a better job, even though I'm proud we're doing this in Kentucky more than any other state, bringing employers in on the front end, because they have answers for us that we haven't asked them before. They have answers about directions and resources, too, that they can provide to help us to build that out. We've done it, SWAT is important here, because we've done these things in silos, where in education we're trying to get them what they need, and then they get out, don't know what else to do, even once that point is there. So there's a lot more to this. I'd love to sit down and talk to you more about it one-on-one, but I appreciate the question.
Representative Callaway.
Thank you, Chairman. A lot of issues have been discussed today. I just want to hit on one piece that I believe is probably the most complex of everything that has been discussed, and that is the addiction piece. I don't know that in 2024 that we have any more illicit drugs that people can be a functioning addict, if there is such a thing anymore. What we're seeing across the state and across the country is unreal. And, you know, people that are already involved with the justice system, if somebody does not get clean, there's almost zero chance that their mind will be clear enough to get the help that they need. And I don't believe government is at all the complete answer to that. I've talked about communities and churches and compassionate people. I'm going to add companies in there too, because I think resources that they can have to be able to know where these people can get the help that they need. But it also starts with, when they become involved with the justice system, what is working and what is not working. And I think it would be great if you all can share that back with those people. If we have things that are not working, if somebody gets detained and they are high and they are released before the paperwork gets filed for their detainment, they will not get help. It's almost zero chance that it's going to happen. And so I know it's a small piece, but starting at 12 years of age, it continually gets lower, the age of children that are taking and trying drugs. The drugs that are out there today are the worst that has ever been, the most addictive that has ever been. And I think that we're going to see this continue to be a problem in our society. And I think we all have to keep that in mind and do everything that we can to work back at the grassroots level and the ground level to make sure these people get clean so they get a clear mind so they can get help. Just something I wanted to throw out there. Don't know how it all fits in. Just I know it's a complex issue, probably more complex than anything that we've talked about.
Representative Callaway, I'll jump in really quick. I think this is something that the chamber 10 years ago was not talking about, and now it's kind of one of our major pillars of work in both policy and in programs. And you're exactly right. It is something that every single one of us in this room has dealt with someone that we know or we loved. And from us as a chamber perspective, we really do bring it back to workforce. And to Representative Kulkarni's point, you know, we are helping those that have been maybe sidelined or underrepresented in the workforce, but to really meet our needs overall, it's kind of a both and approach as well. We have to get everyone off the sidelines, but also attract that talent. And this is a huge portion. We have our Fair Chance Hiring Academy, where we train businesses on how to hire this population coming out of incarceration or coming out of treatment centers. And it's more than employers just wanting to do the right thing. We can all sit here and say, we know it's the right thing to do. We're going to hire this population. It's a different thing to really put that into practice and to have the HR policies and to have the leadership of those companies on board with all this. So from a chamber perspective, we absolutely see your point, and that's why we've been involved in criminal justice reform over the last several years. Is because it is a huge portion of our workforce, and a lot of times it's cyclical. And you're right, if a child sees their parent do that, it's more likely that they're going to do it. And so how can we stop that cycle? So we'd love to talk with you further about that, but just know we are working in both the policy arena as well as the programmatic arena on that issue.
And just very quickly, the beauty of our community and technical colleges is that we're open access. We're for all Kentuckians. We're proud of the fact that we are working with our rehab and recovery community. The Climb Initiative with CPE, 8 of our 16 colleges are now intentionally teaching in our prisons and jails across Kentucky. We hope to get all 16 up doing that as well, because the best way to keep people from going back in is to have a skill and trade to support themselves and their families as well. But we have students who are homeless. We have students who are first-generation immigrants. We have students that are first-generation Kentuckians walking across the stage. So we're for everyone, and that includes helping those Kentuckians out that face adversity.
Mr. Chairman, and I want to address the question in kind of a broad way of coming right back to our intent for introducing SWAT. The comments and the questions and the suggestions in the areas which we all need to work actually points to the complexity of the world we live in. And while I wish I could say that SWAT will be the panacea by which all of these issues themselves get addressed and get taken care of, the answer is they won't. I think what we have to understand is the purpose of SWAT is, and let's make sure we don't get into scope creep the old-fashioned way in terms of let's try to solve everything through one achievement. I think it's so critically important that we understand the magnitude by why SWAT came together and all these leaders said, let's start with leadership, then let's start bringing the groups together, let's build the structure and achieve those processes. If we can really create a foundation of success, of collaboration and coordination, I think then we can better start to address all of these complex issues. I also will tell you, if we have a collaborative foundation of success through SWAT, I also think we're going to be amazed where we find incidents of amazing programs and successes that are happening in with the private sector, because the broad brush isn't the reality. Companies will do what they can to help an individual get off of addiction. They will bring in someone with a disability. You know, back to President Quarles. I've gone into so many facilities where companies bring in workforce and they choose somewhere along the way whether they want to go back to college and become an engineer, and the company pays for them to do that, or the other so proud to work with their hands, they just want to learn more about problem solving and the kind of things they can do to advance, and the companies are willing to pay for it. I think we underestimate the power of what we should really be focusing on, and that is SWAT will achieve coordination and collaboration, but then that becomes the foundation by which I think we can look to address the others. And I simply would like to say that I hope we can focus on really moving SWAT to the next level, and then we can come back and take it to the next level and broaden up and look at all these issues that you all have so properly presented to us today. So thank you.
I want to thank you all for being here today. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for putting all this together. This has been a very important topic. Obviously, we've been an hour and a half almost talking about this, and I'm sure we could probably speak another hour and a half on it. But a lot of great ideas. Appreciate the collaboration. And hopefully, if any members have questions that pop up here post-meeting, we can reach out to you all and hopefully get some answers.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Next up is the overview of Kentucky's Department of Workplace Standards. If you all could please come to the table. And I think you have a PowerPoint. And that the last item ran over a little bit, but we had a lot of good discussion there. So if we could stay kind of around that 10 to 12 minute mark on the presentation and give everyone ample time to ask some questions, we would appreciate it. But really thank you all for being here today. And if you could, please state your names for the record.
Thank you very much for being here, and we do appreciate the opportunity to present on the Department of Workplace Standards. My name is Kimberly Perry. I'm the commissioner.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Chuck Stribling. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for the Department of Workplace Standards.
Thank you for listening to us today. My name is Dwayne Hammonds, and I am the Assistant Director for the Division of Wages and Hours.
Okay, floor is yours.
Thank you. There's introductions. So I'm going to give you a brief overview today of the Department of Workplace Standards to include occupational safety and health compliance, the OSH education and training, which is known as Kentucky SAFE, as well as the Division of Wages and Hour, and briefly discuss the OSH Review Commission that is administratively attached to the Cabinet. Here you'll see our mission statement. I'm not going to read this, but our ultimate goal is to provide every worker with proper and fair pay, as well as to provide every worker a safe and healthy workplace so that they can return home every evening in the same condition that they arrive to work on their work shift. We have the statutory authority to execute the obligations of the Division of Wages and Hour, OSH compliance, as well as Kentucky SAFE. We currently have a coverage of over 1.8 million employees and a little over 149,000 employers. The Division of Compliance, of course, is responsible for the enforcement of the OSH standards. Inspections may be the result of an imminent danger, a fatality, an accident, a hospitalization, amputation, employee complaints, or referrals. So the Kentucky total case work rate related injury and illnesses in 2023 was 3.2 cases per 100 full-time workers. And to put that in perspective, back in 1996, when BLS began tracking this data, Kentucky's rate was 8.4 cases per 100 full-time equivalent workers. As of today, we have had 19 work-related fatalities reported. Compared to the same time last year, we had 35. The OSH Review Commission is a 3-member commission appointed by the governor that's based on competence in the field of occupational safety and health. When an employer disagrees with an OSH citation issued from DWS, they may file an appeal challenging the citation to the Review Commission. From 2018 to 2023, they had 525 cases had been reviewed, and 407 facilitated resolutions during the pre-hearing conference. To speed resolutions, The Review Commission retained a part-time temporary hearing officer to supplement the hearing services provided by the Attorney General. The Review Commission process: if an employer does not agree with an OSH citation, they may file a notice of contest to the department. The cabinet will then notify the Review Commission. The DWS will then file a complaint with the Review Commission, and then the employer will file an answer to that complaint. The Review Commission will then assign the case to an administrative hearing officer who will then schedule conferences, rules on party motions, and if the parties do not settle, they will conduct a hearing. Hearing officers will then submit a recommended order to the Review Commission to either uphold, modify, or dismiss that citation. Either party may appeal directly to the Review Commission for discretionary review if they disagree with the recommended order. If granted, the Review Commission will examine the evidence, the legal argument, and the relevant law, and they may modify, reject the hearing officer's recommended order. The Review Commission can also issue its own order based on examination of the record. If both parties do not disagree, if either party disagrees with the Review Commission, they may appeal to the Franklin Circuit Court. The Division of Education and Training, known as Kentucky SAFE, it's a program that offers free safety and health training and consultative surveys to employers and employees to promote compliance with the OSH standards. They also conduct outreach throughout the state of Kentucky and support the Spanish-speaking population. In federal fiscal year of 2023, Kentucky SAFE consultants identified over 2,800 serious workplace hazards. This saved Kentucky employers more than $19 million in potential enforcement penalties, protecting nearly 56,000 employees. Kentucky SAFE has 3 partnership programs for qualified employers. The first one is Voluntary Partnership Program we refer to as VPP. This program is nationally recognized, and it is designed for the employer who goes above and beyond the minimum requirements of the OSH standards, and they also implement best practices within their workplace. Kentucky currently has 25 certified employers in this program, and to just name a few, we have Kimberly-Clark, L'Oreal, Nucor Steel, Marathon Refinery in Catlettsburg. The Safety and Health Achievement Recognition Program, also known as SHARP, is also a nationally recognized program. It is more designed for the smaller employer with 250 employees or less that are needing assistance to maintain their excellence in their safety and health management project systems. We currently have 14 certified in this program. River Metals Recycling and Minova in Georgetown are a part of that group. And we have the Construction Partnership Program, which is the CPP. We currently have 25 active sites. We have 3 general contractors on the University of Kentucky's campus. We have Messer, we have Walsh, and we have Congleton Hacker that are doing the major products on that campus. We have formal agreements with them. We have a formal agreement on the Oldham County Courthouse with Ware Construction, as well as the Envision Battery Plant in Bowling Green with Yates. If you'd like to see all of our partners, you can find that on the kentuckysafe.ky.gov website. Last spring, federal OSHA, they issued a national emphasis program for heat stress. Approximately 5,000 employees were provided heat stress information through the Kentucky Safe Consultative Surveys, outreach, and training. During 2024, we have conducted 70 OSH training courses, reaching over 1,800 attendees. We have 57 OSH modules and 62 recorded webinars that are posted on the KY Safe website. The Division of Wage and Hour is responsible for the enforcement of labor laws relating to minimum wage, overtime, wage payments, payroll deductions, and wage discrimination. And they are also responsible for the enforcement of child labor laws. From January 1 to end of July, the division collected over $549,000 in restitution for 480 Kentucky employees. For that same period, the division investigated 45 employers for alleged child labor law violations affecting 90 minors. Education and training modules for child labor and wage and hour are available on the KY Safe website. And that's the brief spill from me, and we are open for questions.
Well, thank you all. Appreciate you being here. I have one question. On your inspections, how many of those, I guess, I don't know if you have that data or percentage, are incident or complaint related versus, I don't know, do you do like a drop-in inspections on companies or job sites or whatever it may be? Like, what do you know the percentage of that?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. Almost all, every inspection that's done by the Division of OSH Enforcement is related to imminent danger, fatality, complaint, amputation, or hospitalizations. The days of the Division of OSH Enforcement being able to do what we call the general schedule inspection, where they just drop in, we just don't have the staff. There has been such a significant increase in the amount of complaints that we received, and by law we have to inspect. I'm talking an 84% increase in the last 2 years. And staffing for us is a huge challenge because the economy is great. Our staff come to us. If we get 3 years, we're fortunate. Many times we don't even get 1 year. They walk out the door and they double their salary instantly. Just getting them here. What they said earlier, in this profession, an individual with a degree in OSH is graduating from Murray State and/or Eastern, and I'm plugging our state universities there, at about $80,000. To get them to come to work for us for $48,000, it's a huge lift. Every once in a while, we'll get lucky and have somebody who wants to stay local. Sorry for the long question, but we do very, very few general schedule inspections because of staffing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's see. Representative Pratt.
Excuse me. I think this question from Mr. Hammonds. As you know, Kentucky wage and hour law contains an exemption for agriculture. That means if a worker on a farm puts in more than 40 hours in a week, he is not entitled to time and a half like he would if he worked in a factory somewhere like that. Is that correct?
Yes, they would not qualify as gainful occupation.
But recently, someone asked me, the employer, about a farm must pay overtime for hours worked on Sunday, the seventh day law. Is that correct?
Yes, there are no exemptions for seventh day law for employees.
Even for agriculture?
Even for agriculture, yes, sir.
Would you like to send me the copies of enforcement of that guidance? Would you do that for me?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
If you could, just send that to staff, and then they can distribute that among the members.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Representative Gentry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Guys, do you I think you still track statistics for amputations and is it eye loss? And does that include visual impairments of all degree, or how does that work?
Yes, sir. My office tracks that, and religiously tracks that. We have extremely detailed data. But in order to qualify under the law as loss of eye, it means your eyeball comes out of your head. It physically has to come out of the socket in order to meet the definition.
Okay, and I don't know if you were in the room when I was talking about people with disabilities earlier, but I would classify these as one of the things I referred to as permanent but partial disabilities in a lot of cases, or that's how they would be medically classified. Do we have accessible data that would be available to us on, how often these happen, I guess, annually? I guess you do, since you track that. And is there any kind of tracking mechanism for other types of disabilities besides the amputation and eye loss?
Yeah, we track primarily the amputations, hospitalizations, and loss of eye. That's what's required by the federal government. So it's part of our annual and strategic plan to reduce those injuries. So we keep an annual database. Beyond that, we don't compile that particular data, but we might be able to access something like that through BLS.
Thank you.
Okay, no further questions. Oh, one more. Senator Funky Fromeyer.
Thank you. One of the last points on your slide said for the same period, investigated 45 employers for alleged child labor law violations. Can you explain kind of the difference of Kentucky's child labor laws versus the federal labor laws? I get a number of questions in my Senate district because we've got students that really want to work, but there seems to be some restrictions. Help us understand, and where's the friction there? How can we improve that?
Well, we mirror the federal Fair Labor Standard Act on a lot of the hazardous occupations that may occur. So we look at the hazardous occupations from the Fair Labor Standard Act, and that is our golden ticket. There are two additional hazardous occupations listed in our law for Kentucky that are not listed in the Fair Labor Standard Act. One is working in a distillery, and the other one is in a pool hall. So minors are not allowed to work there. As far as the hours restrictions, we do mirror the Federal Department of Labor in the 14 and 15-year-olds. The restrictions are the same as theirs as to us. So there's no difference whatsoever. When they're 16 or 17, there are hours restrictions listed for Kentucky that are not necessarily listed for the Federal Fair Labor Standard Act.
And I'm sorry, just to follow up on that. Is there any reasoning behind restrictions of 12-year-olds working or 14-year-olds working? I've gotten a little feedback from some businesses in my community.
Currently, right now, in the state of Kentucky, 14-year-olds for gainful occupation would be the earliest age that you can have gainful occupation. So that would be the point when a minor is allowed to work in the state, which corresponds with the federal law. Okay. The restrictions have been set forth from the federal side, and like I said, we've just mirrored those with our laws here. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but if there's anything else.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for being here today. Appreciate your presentation. Members, appreciate your comments and your questions. Want to remind everyone, September 26th, October 24th, and November 19th are our next scheduled meetings. And there being no further business for the committee, we are adjourned.